So let's go a few more minutes. When we left off, let's go back and review quickly. We're talking about the drawbacks of relying on human intellect alone because there's two reasons for not relying on human logic and observing the Mishpatim, these laws that like human logic mandates, and therefore bringing disputes before a Jewish court and not a Jewish one. Excuse me, the non-Jewish court, even if it's a court where the court would give a ruling that's along with the Torah because human logic mandates it. It's still different, and why we don't rely on human wisdom uh, in observing the Mishpatim is where the observance of these mitzvahs is to be dictated by the logic of our animal souls, there would be a tendency towards spiritual descent, as implied by our sage's statement in Shabbos 105b. Today, if the Yetzer Hara tells a person to do this, tomorrow it tells him do that, until it tells him go worship false deities. So my revered father-in-law, the Rebbe, explains that in Sefer Hamamrim Contrasim, that at first the Yetzer Hara does not have the boldness to entice a Jew to sin, as we were talking about, God forbid, chas v'shalom. Therefore, when it first approaches him, it speaks about a mitzvah. And this is a whole new level of trickery, mamish. When the Jew wants to perform a mitzvah, the Yetzer Hara tells him, do this, do what the Torah commands. But when a person fulfills a mitzvah because the Yetzer Hara tells him, do this, i.e., because his animal soul deems it as beneficial to do so, and not because God commanded him to do so in the Torah, he thereby severs his connection with God. Then on, it is possible for the Yetzer Hara to entice the person to descend lower and lower. Tomorrow it will tell him do that, and ultimately it will tell him go worship false deities. So the second reason here for not relying on human logic and observing the mishpatim, which are once again these mitzvahs represent this category that even human logic mandates. Uh, Another reason the observance of the mitzvahs may not be motivated only because of the dictates of mortal wisdom is that even when the person actually observes the mitzvahs, his observance will lack a fundamental element. The awareness of the connection that stems from and is established with, I am God your Lord. The word mitzvah is related to the word sabsa, meaning connection. A person who observes mitzvahs only because of human wisdom, where we left off last time, will not appreciate that his observance derives from and is an expression of the Torah mandates, and that their fulfillment connects him to God. And may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable for you, Lord, my strength and my redeemer. As always, I learn in honor of my brother Theodore Jason Ben Homer Doler and the excellence that we've been able to push forward in his name. Continue along on page 332, a drive out towards outreach. Number 5, as mentioned previously, when we were talking about in Lakute Sichos, volume 388, and the sources that are there, the fusion of two extremes in the Ten Commandments teaches a twofold lesson. Okay, so to borrow the wording of Rash and Shmos Rabbah 12:3, the higher realms should descend to the lower realms, and the analog, the spiritual power embodied in the commandments, I am God, and you shall have no other gods, according to the book of Exodus, Shmais, in the 20th chapter, 3rd verse. I'm your God, and you shall have no other gods, must descend and be felt in the observance of the commandments. Do not kill and do not steal. Even these mitzvahs should be observed because they were commanded by God Himself, not just because it's not a logical mandate to do so, that we don't do these unkind things. The driving force for it to have the inner vitality that we are seeking and desire to have is that when these mitzvahs of do not kill and do not steal should be observed because they were commanded by God Himself. B, the lower realms are to ascend to the higher realms. So we saw that the higher realms should come to the lower realms, and then the lower realms uh, are to ascend to the higher realms. In this analog, the term lower realms refers to people who by nature are even less developed than animals, and thus do not learn the prohibitions against theft from an ant, because it's saying here that, you know, in Erevin 100b in Lakute Sichos, also volume 3, page B, it states that the Rebbe Ra'atz related that when his father would give it over, he would say, God forbid that we'd learn not stealing from an ant. The concept of modesty could have been taught to us as human logic would mandate from a we could learn these lessons. But this is not uh, they must be commanded, do not kill and do not steal by God. Oh, pardon me, who declared Anoki Havaya Eloheka, which means I am God, your Lord, i.e., they relate to his essence, the level of Anohi, I, the only one who can truly be called I. Otherwise, they would not observe these prohibitions. Even such individuals must ascend to the higher realms, okay, and develop their faith through the contemplation and knowledge of godliness in order to establish a connection and indeed with his essence, I, the only one who can truly be called I. These two directives are emphasized again at the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, where we're at right now, which, as mentioned above, we're in the 21st chapter of Exodus still. And then we'll be moving on. Based on our sage's statement, these complement those which came before, is a continuation of the giving of the Torah. As stated previously, one of the lessons this teaches is that even the observance of Mishpatim must be lifnei for him, inspired by the inner depths of the soul. This reflects the descent of the higher realms to the lowest realms, okay? Now, also implied by the descent of the higher realms to the lower realms is that Torah scholars must descend and involve themselves with simple people, teaching them, providing them with guidance. In this vein, the Midrash and Shmos Rabbah 30:13 comments on the verse, and Mishlei, the book of Proverbs, 29th chapter, 4th verse. A king establishes the land with justice, while an elevated man destroys it, explaining that the latter phrase refers to, quote unquote, a wise man who knows halakha, Jewish law, and midrash, the commentaries of it, and the agada, but says, I am busy with my study. I have no time for others. As mentioned above, all our sages' interpretation of a verse are interrelated. We also learned most recently that we need to make sure that we're verbalizing and articulating our questions or thoughts or even beliefs or disbeliefs for certain matters of Torah, as it's better for our growth. Simultaneously, we are also instructed that the lower realms must ascend to the higher realms. Even those who are in the lower realms, students who have a minimal knowledge of the Torah and who do not have the ability to make distinctions, must be shown how to study with everything prepared for them as a table set before a person ready for him to eat. Rashi Makilta commenting on Shmos 21:1. Also want to let you know that once the table's set, when you sit down, you got to eat in order. You just don't come down to the table with all your pleasures and just you want to God forbid. We're kings. We don't act in such a manner. Moreover, this can also refer to those who are lowly with regard to their conduct and moral development, such as litigants who occasionally advance false arguments. Although the word lifnehem, before them, refers to the judges, it also relates to the litigants, since it is speaking about disputes. These lowly individuals are also commanded to ascend to the higher realms. They must be exposed to the treasure trove of Panemius Hatyra, the Tyra's inner mystic core and face. There is no question if it is appropriate to share these teachings with them, for when looking Lifnehem before them at the inner dimensions of the soul, all Jews are potentially worthy, fit, to receive these treasures, the Torah's deepest teachings. Although the inner dimension of the soul is hidden within such people, it is within their capacity to reveal it, and we are obligated to help them. And this is accomplished by place before them, Lefnehem, placing it before them, and thus exposing them to the Torah's treasures. This will awaken and reveal the inner dimension of their souls to an even greater degree and motivate this inner potential to permeate their conscious powers of thought and feeling. They will be empowered to internalize it, to place it in their hearts. And this will also affect the observance of the mitzvahs with energy and vitality. They will then live in them, according to Shmos Rabbah. So we want to live Nehem, live in them. Okay.